Hello, this is Stephen L, and yes, we are back in Animation Corner for yet another animated TV show review. And today, we'll be reviewing the beloved and one of the most influential animated superhero shows of all time, Batman the Animated Series, first airing in 1992. This is arguably the most influential and most beloved interpretations of Batman out there. It is the most beloved superhero cartoon ever. In fact, this series held the standard and benchmark for all superhero programs that have followed. So, with that very brief summary out of the way, we'll be getting into some background info, we'll be getting into some the voice actors, we'll be reviewing season by season by season, and of course I will give my own thoughts and synopsis on the series in general, and of course rank it at the usual stars in do I believe that it has deserved its ranking as being one of the greatest cartoon shows of all time. Well, with that long thing out of the way, let's get straight into this review, shall we? But first, let's get to some background info. Batman the Animated Series essentially is the brainchild of Bruce Timm, Paul Dini, and Mitch Bryan. It was produced through Warner Brothers Animations and originally aired on Fox Kids on September 5, 1992 to 1995. Essentially, how this series came about to be created. First of all, Bruce Timm and Paul Dini were huge, avid fans of the classic Batman comics, specifically the Bronze Age of comics. You know, pretty much that began right around the early 70s, all the way to throughout the 80s and the 90s. The series is also pretty much wouldn't also be possible if it wasn't not only for that, but it also wasn't for the release of Tim Burton's Batman in 1989. When that film came out, it was a massive hit and showed the world the true Dark Knight that most comic book fans and pretty much superhero fans in general have always viewed or seen the Dark Knight since, since then, pretty much. With pretty much almost a creative freedom to do whatever they want, with of course making sure that it is a kid's cartoon, and went forth with that in mind. The series is also known for its film noir style, its dark tone, its dark silhouette. For many, this is considered the quintessential Batman. Some say the definitive Batman. This series is definitely influential and has created, and pretty much created what many people would consider Batman, especially if you grew up watching Batman on TV in the 90s. This series would also launch off several spin-off TV shows that started the DC Animated Universe, because there's a whole bunch of cartoons. Some I will be reviewing a little bit, because some do pertain to this series. Overall, with that is essentially the background info that we need to do. The original series ran for 3 seasons. It has a sort of, people consider it a 4th season. It's a kind of sub-series. I'll explain a little bit that later. And it also had 2, 3-ish animated movies under a part of the series. Anyway, with that long background info out of the way, let's get into a bit of the casting, hey? The series, of course, gave us with Batman and Bruce Wayne being voiced by Kevin Conroy. The legendary man is forever associated with Batman, and many people consider him to be the quintessential animated voice for Batman, and it's all because of his voice performance. He was one of the first to really have, when Batman has this more dark tone in his voice, but when he's Bruce Wayne, it's sort of light and lighthearted. He purposely makes sure that both characters had 2 distinct voices in order to make the character feel a bit more authentic, but also probably because for the majority of the Batman that has been on cartoons, and surprisingly even in the beloved Batman TV show, majority of the time Batman still had the same voice. There was no real way of making sure that there was no real, I guess you would say, like, differentiated voices. And Kevin Conroy was the first to do so, and we can all agree he was probably the best choice for that. We also here have Nightwing, who was for the later became Nightwing, but in the early 3 seasons he was the original Robin. This is the classic Dick Grayson version, voiced by Lauren Lester. Honestly, a really very underappreciated voice actor in the lineup for me, in my honest opinion. Um, he pretty much played Robin, his take on Robin, as a more upbeat, rough, tough kind of character, almost like a young adult teenager type. But when he became Nightwing, he kind of became a little bit of Batman, but he still had his own enthusiasm still in the character. If that even makes a little bit of sense. For me, he's the quintessential voice for Robin for me. And I think, and honestly, Lester deserves all the praise and appreciation that he did. We also here have, of course, the beloved Alfred. In the early series, three episodes in production order, he was voiced by Clive Rivell, probably butchering that, but he later be voiced by Efren Zimbalist Jr. for the rest of the series. I personally prefer the second voice actor because, honestly, this is Alfred. He's a person loyal to Bruce, but he has these, one-liners that are absolutely great and hilarious, and I'm pretty sure everyone, enjoyed that bit. For me, Alfred, even though he's supposed to be loyal beside Bruce, he should have a wisecrack every now and again, almost a bit of comic relief. And he looks like Alfred was ripped straight off the page. Other character we have here is, of course, Commissioner James Jim Gordon, portrayed by Bob Hastings, who, as I've been told, is a legendary voice actor in his own right. And this too is how I've always viewed Gordon in his old age. A man, even though he's the highest ranking, you can always see him, always on the street, almost like he's still a detective, despite the fact he should really be more bureaucrat, if that's the thing, for such a high position. And beside him is, of course, fan favorite Detective Harvey Bullock, voiced by Robert Castonza. Honestly, Bullock, this is probably the introduction to me and many people to the character of Bullock. Bullock, essentially, by first appearance, he looks like a bent and bought-off cop. He doesn't like Batman purely because he's a vigilante. But you see, the two do recognize each other, that they are good people, if you can even say that. And they know they have to kind of put their differences aside and work together in order to protect, the larger city, essentially. As that is far more important compared to, their own personal feelings, essentially. The series also gave us pretty much Renee Montoya, who is now huge in the comics, but she wasn't originally a comic book character. She was actually, created specifically for the animated series, essentially as a female cop. Originally voiced by Ingrid Luna in Season 1, but later Lina Strimmer in the second season. She makes an impression, and I love when they pair her up with Bullock, because they have this sort of buddy cop thing, which I appreciate when they do that every now and again. We also here have another character of Mayor Hamilton Hill, voiced by Lloyd Buchner. In the comics, Hill is normally portrayed as a bent or on-the-take mayor, but in the series, he's an actually honest, upstanding mayor, and he kind of appears every now and again. And he's essentially many of what I call the series background characters for me, in my humble opinion. We also here have Batgirl in the series. I absolutely love this take. She is voiced by Melissa Gilbert in the original animated series, but she's voiced by Tara Strong in the rest of, in the essentially the new Batman Adventures, which many people consider the fourth season of the show. Again, just like I view with Nightwing, I view that this to be the definitive take. Now, I'm mixed a bit with Batgirl as a character in general. I love her when she pops up, but half the time I don't feel she's written well or produces that much into the story, especially... even I admit, in the original animated series, she kind of felt like a needed addition. But in the new Batman Adventures, I felt that she was a little bit aged down, in at least how the character was drawn. I love the costume, and I do feel that Tara Strong, for me, is the quintessential voice for me for Batgirl. That's always been, at least my opinion, anyway. And speaking of the new adventures, we have the Tim Drake version of Robin, voiced by Matthew Valinka. Probably butchering that name like a... I don't know what you would call it, but I know I'm butchering that. I kind of like how he's very different to the Dick Grayson Nightwing. He feels far more younger, energetic. He kind of comes off as being heavily influenced by the Burt Ward incarnation of Robin in the classic Adam West show, but they felt like they've adapted him. Ironically, they've also used, instead of the classic Tim Drake backstory for this Robin, they've instead adapted the Jason Todd backstory. This was because the creators realized they were going to introduce Jason Todd, they couldn't kill him off and do the whole... And he didn't... And this was long before he came back as the Red Hood. That hadn't been established yet. So instead, they took the Jason Todd backstory and just instead used Tim Drake. This way, they could have their Robin evolve to become the new... to become Nightwing, essentially. And here are the villains. Boy, did this series had a great roster of supervillains. It's really hard to narrow it down. So let's just name some of them. I'm probably not going to name all of them, but I'll try and name some of the majority of them. First off, we've got the Joker, voiced by the always talented Mark Hamill, aka Luke Skywalker from the Star Wars series. Just like Kevin Conroy is the voice of Batman to people, Mark Hamill is the quintessential Joker voice to many people. His portrayal of the Joker, for me, is feel like a character ripped straight from the comics. A homicidal maniac, essentially a clown that does crimes to amuse himself and continues ever fixated obsession with Batman. The series was also known for introducing both Two-Face and Poison Ivy to finally to get them out of the comics and into some form of media. Two-Face was voiced, of course, by Richard Mole, and is the quintessential Two-Face voice to many people. Even those who tried to do it, do Two-Face impression in cartoons, you can't help but they're getting a little bit influenced by Richard Mole. And of course, Poison Ivy was voiced by Diane Pershing, and she is essentially portrayed as a classic femme fatale with a very much an obsession with plants, viewing them as far more important than humans. That is quintessential, for me, Poison Ivy. The series also introduced Killer Croc to the media for the first time. Again, a regular member of the Batman Rogues Gallery, but, was rarely portrayed outside the media after that. Voiced by Aaron Kincaid. I'll be honest, Killer Croc is a character that, in some episodes, is portrayed as a serious threat. Other times, he's portrayed almost as comic relief. But I do like that the character can be blended, but I do feel it hurt the character because there was no consistency. The series also gave us the Penguin. This version is heavily influenced, of course, by the Batman Returns at the time, because it was mandated that the creators had to have the character resemble Danny DeVito's take. So the series had to kind of do that. The voice actor, Paul Williams, honestly gives the Penguin a more refined elegantness that most voice actors who do Penguin don't. I absolutely love that bit. I love what they do. And of course there's Selena Kyle, aka Catwoman, portrayed not much so as a more anti-hero, but not really much with the villainous roots. I'll explain a little bit more as we go along. Audrey Barbeau, I'm presuming that's how her last name is pronounced, does the voice, and again, does a tremendous job. John Glover voices Edward Nygma, aka the Riddler. This series gave us the quintessential modern Riddler, a more smooth talker, a narcissist and smug jerk who views himself as intellectually superior against everyone around him, and views his challenges with Batman as a game. The character did kind of get, was written mixed throughout the series for me, and doesn't appear in that much episodes, but I thought they did him pretty reasonably well. The series also gave us the Mad Hatter, voiced, well, shouldn't have gave, but did what many people consider, just like Riddler, the definitive take of the Mad Hatter. He was voiced by Roddy McDowall, who, as we remember, way back, actually played the Bookworm, a Batman villain, in the classic Adam West 60s Batman show. But the series' crowning achievement will be for the creation of Harleen Quinzel, aka Harley Quinn, the most successful comic book character ever, ironic because she never came from a comic book. voiced by Orleen Sorkins, and she set the benchmark for many actresses who had to play Harley Quinn. She set the build up. You also have Clayface, voiced by Ron Perlman. Ironically, they adapted the Basil Karlo incarnation, but they used the Matt Hagen alias. Matt Hagen is the second incarnation of Clayface, and has the more physical, form that we expect from Clayface. So they kind of combine the two, and it's kind of weird that they go with that direction, but hey, it's what it is. This series also was the introduction to Ra's al Ghul, voiced by David Warner. Ra's al Ghul is a huge Batman villain. Now, I'm not the biggest Ra's al Ghul fan, if I'm blunt, but I don't mind when he does appear. I have to go the same with Bane. Bane also makes his first appearance in the series, and too, just like Killer Croc, was adapted. Ironically, because he was very much new at the time. Bane is voiced by Henry Silva, and Silva, I'm pretty sure that's how it's pronounced. And again, this interpretation has essentially influenced many people who have come in its way. Interesting fact, the series also went to adapt villains that weren't from Batman's Rogues Gallery, but surprisingly do work for this one. Clock King, aka this version, Temple Fugate, was voiced by Alan Ritchson. Now, this is not the first time Batman's battled the Clock King. In fact, in the Adam West show, he appeared. But it's ironic because Clock King is not from Batman's Rogues Gallery. He's from really Green Arrows. But he tends to... But Clock King is one of those villains that could easily work in Batman's Rogues Gallery. And just like this, I do love his appearance. He only really appeared in 2 episodes, but unlike most, I'm glad he doesn't get that much appearances because I feel it really works. The series also introduced the Ventriloquist and Scarface, voiced by George Dazungdas. I don't know how that last name's pronounced. I'm pretty sure the guy voiced both the Ventriloquist and Scarface and does a fantastic job. Just like Bane, the Ventriloquist and Scarface were very new to Batman in the comics at the time, but work very well. Of course, you've also got the Scarecrow, who has a unique when it comes to his visual design. For the early original series, he was voiced by Henry Pollock II, and the character's design, I prefer what the character. I'm kind of mixed. I think I might have explained. If you want to know more, I think I might have explained it in my top 10 Batman animated series villains. You could more about that. Then you have, of course, Kurt Langstrom, aka Man-Bat, voiced by Mark Signer. Ironically, Man-Bat himself doesn't appear that much in the series, but he does appear every now and again. The series also gave Baby Doll a very unique and different villain, but honestly, surprisingly, worked very, very much well. Baby Doll pretty much worked. Voiced by Alison Laplaska, I'm probably butchering that name. But of course, the series for me forever should be heavily remembered for the redefining of Dr. Victor Freeze, aka Mr. Freeze, voiced by Michael Ansara. Probably butchering that last name. And again, he set the tone for Mr. Freeze, reinvented the character, who for the majority of the comics was pretty much just a one-note gimmick villain, but this reinvented the character and gave him a very much more compelling and interesting backstory that has since been adapted in media since. Anyway, I believe that's the voice cast out of the way. Let's get into the series. The first official episode of the series is Leather Wings, which basically introduces Man-Bat to the series. Basically, a mysterious bat-like creature terrorizes Gotham, and, and the police assume it's Batman. The Dark Knight essentially must clear his name and find the real perpetrator. I love how the episode establishes the tone of the series, the dark silhouette, and I love that. I feel like some of it is not fully realized, some of the voice is a little off at times. I also feel the shadows are a bit darker here, but I absolutely love it. Christmas with the Joker is a classic Christmas Joker story. Basically, Joker escapes Arkham and terrorizes Gotham on the airwaves, and basically he has 3 hostages, and Batman must find them before midnight before he kills them off. It's a classic Joker story, but there's nothing wrong with the classic Joker story. Nothing to Fear is a classic case of every time Batman encounters Mr. Freeze, the Scarecrow, he gets gassed, and of course, has to relive. Well, I wouldn't say relive the death of his parents, but live a essentially moment in his life. And one is how people say he's disgracing the family name and is nothing like, that a father would be ashamed of him. I love that episode. I also love that, except for maybe the Joker and the Penguin, every time they introduce a villain, they have an episode dedicated to their origin, to how they became. I always felt that Scarecrow might have the weakest, but at the same time, I absolutely, love, like, his motivation. He wants to destroy a university, because in his mind, the university wronged him, but really he's in the wrong. I like it when you have that kind of psychology. Pretty Poison is the introduction to Poison Ivy. Interesting fact, interesting in the series, Poison Ivy and Two-Face have a very interesting relationship. As, like when Harvey Dent becomes Two-Face later on in the series, Two-Face hates Poison Ivy because Poison Ivy tried to kill him back when he was Harvey Dent. Harvey Dent was introduced in 2 episodes in the original series before becoming Two-Face. Before becoming Two-Face, he was introduced a few times as Harvey Dent, and here they established that Bruce Wayne is friends with Harvey, which would have dividends for later on. I say the series had some very mediocre, bland episodes following that episode with the Underdwellers and POV, I should say, which ironically introduced Officer Romain Montoya, which has become a big part of the series, and arguably Batman comics in general. A very underrated episode of the first season is, of course, the episode The Forgotten. Basically, Bruce goes undercover as a homeless person to find out who's been kidnapping homeless persons, only to end up getting kidnapped and sent to a mining camp. He gets amnesia and forgets who he is. I just love the setting here, the western atmosphere, and the soundtrack. People don't give this episode enough credit. It's an absolute classic for me. Then, of course, we have another, from my opinion, classic episode, Two-Face. It's a 2-parter, 1 and 2, which basically tells the origin of Two-Face. Two-Face is really Harvey Dent, Gotham City District Attorney, who is suffering from a split personality disorder. He's trying to keep it under wraps for re-election. He wants to get married to his fiancée, Grace, but he's also trying to take down one of the biggest crime boss in the city, Rupert Thorne. After Rupert Thorne tried to blackmail him with his psychosis, mental records, he ends up getting disfigured and becomes Two-Face. In the second part, he, crowned himself as Two-Face and essentially has an all-out war on Rupert Thorne's illegal businesses. I love it how it establishes that out of all the Batman rogues galleries, Batman has a personal connection with Two-Face because they used to be friends, and in the comics, Harvey Dent and Batman were even friends. So when he sees Two-Face, it's the loss of a former partner that he still hopes one day will reform. It also has a classic ending of, when Two-Face uses his coin, Batman throws coins in the air. It came from this episode. It's Never Too Late for Me is another underrated episode where basically a mob war breaks out between Rupert Thorne and another rival gangster, Arnold Strongwell. And essentially, Arnold Strongwell is an old-school mob, and Rupert Thorne was muscling him out. After Batman saves him from assassination attempt by Thorne, Batman essentially tries to have Strongwell, reform and rat out all the criminal operations. But we also see Strongwell does suffer some guilt, a trauma. I love how Batman is actually putting himself on the line to help a stranger. This is something that we forget in Batman, where Batman is legit trying to reach his hands out to the villains and try to save them. Something I felt we've forgotten in more Batman comics, as he generally wants to help people, even if it's a supervillain like I would say Two-Face, to a run-of-the-mill gangster like Strongwell. This is a really underrated episode. I recommend giving it a watch. Then, of course, comes the Emmy-winning World Series episode, Heart of Ice. And again, it tells the origin of Mr. Freeze, the frozen wife. You see, before that episode came out, Mr. Freeze was a joke villain. He only had an ice gimmick, and that was really it. But the, how must remain in a certain degree environment was still the same. In this episode, they established the wife aspect to his origin. I love the ending here with Freeze in his cell begging his wife's forgiveness and praying, that he'll be reunited with her, and seeing Batman look outside looking into his cell is a great imagery and shows Batman is actually showing some compassion and, sympathy for Mr. Freeze. Again, this series was an Emmy Award winning, it redefined Mr. Freeze, and to this day, when we think of Mr. Freeze, we have this episode to thank. The Cat and the Claw, Part 1 and 2, essentially introduces Catwoman into the series. It also introduces a villain, Red Claw, who would come back later, but honestly, I'm not really a fan of the two-parter. I mean, Catwoman's alright, and I do love how they reinvented her in many ways. But as the series went on, they would slowly have the character become more the traditional anti-hero thief. But it's also clear that Batman has feelings for Selina and really wants her to reform. Overall, again, I'm mixed with the Cat and the Claw episode. I don't mind watching it, but I'm always aware of it. You know, mixed anyway. Beware the Grey Ghost is another great episode. Basically, Simon Trenton, who an actor best known for the role of the Grey Ghost, who Bruce Wayne used to love watching growing up as a kid, is basically bankrupt in a declining career. And basically has to sell off the Grey Ghost merchandise in order to make rent money. But while this is going on, there's a bomb going around the city that are mimicking from the old show. Batman, who remembered the old show, and finds out there's very few copies of it left. So he goes to the actor himself to find out. I love how this is one of the few times in any form of media where they show some happy moments from Bruce's childhood, and I loved every minute of it. Another thing I also loved, who they got to voice the Grey Ghost. Of course, it is Adam West himself. The character pretty much mirrors Adam West's real, post-fame after the original Batman show. Despite what you may think about the show, for me, Adam West made that role work. And I do love how, he did, especially, I think, after the 80s, he got more recognition in roles, especially in voice animation. But basically, this episode, you get two Batmans for the price of one. The villain's weak, but God, it's a great episode. And it's really great to see, Bruce actually having some great moments from his childhood and constantly not in tragedy. Feet of Clay is another two-parter. Basically, it tells the origin of Clayface. Clayface mixes in the mash of the classic Basil Karlo origin a bit, but also the Matt Hagen. Basically, in the series, Matt Hagen is a film star, but he was disfigured once. But he was given this cream by Roland Daggett to use on his face, but it's a limited product, so he's constantly doing jobs for Daggett. But once he's botched the job of essentially framing Bruce Wayne for attempted murder on Lucius Fox, he essentially, Matt Hagen wants to get his hands on the cream to, fix his cream, and not constantly go for Daggett. Daggett realized that Matt Hagen is a loose end and needs to get rid of him. Batman is, of course, trying to clear his name while all this is going down. The second part is essentially, basically, because at the end of the part one, he is disfigured by having himself be drowned in this clay stuff, which turns him into this freak. But he finds out he can actually shapeshift into anyone he sees. Using this, he then goes on a revenge quest to get revenge on Daggett for what he did. The episode ends with essentially a classic, I would say almost slasher trope, or if you think the character's dead but he's actually alive. Again, it fits Clayface's character. And I do love how, Clayface is kind of a bit of a jerk, but he does have his moments. Even he didn't deserve this. Joker's Favor is another classic episode. It introduced Harley Quinn, and basically it's about this guy named Charlie who after one day has an encounter with the Joker. And basically, Joker pretty much spares him in exchange to do him a favor down the line. 2 years later have passed, and Joker calls in on that favor. Again, this introduced Harley Quinn, who was meant to be just a one-note character, but she was so popular they brought her back. The episode Vendetta introduced Killer Croc, and basically, Killer Croc is basically framing Bullock for kidnapping, and Batman has to step in. Fear of Victory is basically, the Scarecrow is back, and he's using fear toxins to use against sports stars and bets on them in order to make some quick cash. Robin gets infected with the fear toxin, and he has to overcome it. It's just a nice, okay episode. The Clock King is another great episode. Introduces Clock King, and this Clock King was done differently. Temple Fugit ran a company but went bankrupt, and he blames Hamilton Hill, because Hamilton Hill played a hand in it. It shows, and it to be fair, true, and especially since I think it was Hamilton's law firm that did play found out was actually prosecuting. What I love about, like, Temple Fugit, you can tell this guy's obsessed with time. For me, Clock King, in order to work, you have to show him he's a little bit off. And I love that they do go down that specific road. Because I don't think it would have worked otherwise if they, you know, didn't do it that way, in my honest opinion. Other great episode is Mad as a Hatter, which introduced the Mad Hatter to the Batman animated series. Basically, the Jervis test is basically works in Wayne Industries, and essentially has discovered ways to control brainwaves, which was originally meant to enhance the brain's capability. But he has a crush on a girl named Alice. When he hears that, you know, that the boyfriend's out of the picture, but really it's just a separation, he takes advantage of that and you know, essentially pursues what he thinks is a romantic relationship with her. And essentially she views him as odd, but you tell that, you know, she does like the guy. It's a nice day, and he dresses up in his Mad Hatter costume. It's shown the guy was always obsessed with the Mad Hatter, you know, Alice in Wonderland, even to the point of quoting from the book, which has become a Mad Hatter stable. But at the end, he finds out that she's getting back with her boyfriend, and in fact, the boyfriend proposes. He goes into a fit of enrage. He uses his device to essentially have the husband, you know, the fiance break up with Alice. Batman gets caught into this really by accident. And I love how it ends with, we feel sorry for the Mad Hatter, because all he wants is love and compassion. But he has to learn that, you know, you may love someone, do they love you back? You can't force it. It's a sad thing for the Mad Hatter. And I love how, as the Mad Hatter's defeated, he's looking at Alice hug his fiance. And the fiance is a nice guy. He's not a jerk. They just had their moment. And I love as he's seeing, you know, the two hug. All he could do was cry and mope. Would not join the dance. His fantasy's ruined, and basically, that's what it is. The Mad Hatter, for me, was always a unique villain because he used mind control, but it's also just a person who just wanted love. Again, this series helped define that. Dreams in Darkness, basically, Batman's incarcerated in Arkham, but is exposed to the Scarecrow's fear gas. Batman knows that the Scarecrow, you know, has escaped and is planning to gas the Gotham City water supply. But the Arkham staff don't believe him, so he has to kind of do it on his own. This episode, for me, especially the scheme of poisoning the water supply with this fear toxin, is an element they would use in the Batman, you know, Begins movie. Another great episode is Perchance the Dream, where Bruce Wayne wakes up one morning and finds that his life is completely different. His parents are alive, he's engaged to Selina Kyle, and finds out there's a new Batman. At first, he doesn't know what to make of it. But then he accepts it, and the tragedy ends when he realizes it's all a lie. It's a tragedy that you know, his happy ending that he wanted ended because he really couldn't, you know, because he knew it wasn't right. I love how we get episodes like that, where, you know, where Bruce wants to pursue happiness, but his devotion to duty, you know, prevents him for that. Another fan favorite episode of mine is Robin's Reckoning, which is a two-parter, and this explored Robin's origin. The first part, basically, this one was another Emmy winner, and basically, what I love about it is it shows Robin's origin. We've already seen Batman's origin, but before Batman Forever came out, Robin's origin was not. Basically, Robin grew after a nightly patrol. Batman knows a crime boss, Billy Marin, is back. Robin's kicked off the case. Robin doesn't know why, but he researches the name Billy Marin, but he finds out it's an alias for Tony Zuko, the man that killed his parents way back. We see a flashback to you know, Robin's, you know, time as a kid, from when he grew up in the circus. And basically, Tony Zuko was trying to muscle his way of being, you know, of running Gotham's protection racket. And to get back at them for refusing his protection, he does this little, you know, thing that results in the unfortunate death of Dick's parents. That's what I loved about this episode. It explores Dick's origin. And the second part is him going on his own, avenging his parents, but it also explores really more of how, you know, the flashbacks also shows, in both parts, how he came under Bruce's care. And in Bruce, you know, Bruce took him in because he was there when Dick's parents died. Took him under his wing and essentially tried to get him a better life. But after the events in the flashbacks, he realizes, you know, he agrees to train Dick to become his sidekick. I love the episode because of that. you know, how it forms the bond between, you know, Bruce and Dick, and, you know, that Bruce, of course, wants to avenge his parents' death. So he knows exactly what Dick's going through, and especially, you know, that father-son dynamic is formed between those two characters, and that's what I absolutely love about that episode. Just in general. The Laughing Fish is another classic episode of the series. Basically, Joker's poisoned all the Gotham fish and basically has a copyright infringement, if you would say. Where basically, you know, they must, you know, where basically he wants a copyright on all fish sold and eaten in Gotham. It's based off a classic story of in the Batman comics. And what I love about it, I think this is really, like, again, they've already established the Joker's personality so great, but I love how, I think, for me, this is really where it all comes to be. The series also gave us another episode, If You're So Smart, Why Aren't You Rich?, which, of course, introduced the Riddler to the series. And again, redefined the character and made him almost very sympathetic. And basically, you know, he wants to get revenge on Mockridge, who stole his game idea and takes on the persona of the Riddler. Here we see the Riddler, less of the classic 60s cackling Looney Tune that we remember from the old 60s show, but more of a smug, sophisticated criminal who, even though he uses riddles, they're more brain teasers really, and Batman has to really think to basically solve them. Another episode I want to talk about, which I absolutely loved in the series, is Almost Got Him. Many people consider this the greatest Batman episode of the series. Here in this, basically the Joker, Killer Croc, the Penguin, Two-Face, and Poison Ivy are all at a bar, and they are essentially, you know, just talking about, you know, times they came close, each claimed they came close to killing Batman. And that's essentially it. It's just them. What I love about the series is its biggest strength was always the villains. And I loved every minute of that. Villains. And, you know, they have different personalities. There's quirks. Other villains poke fun at their quirks. So I really love it for that. The series also basically explains where Batman got his giant penny that we always see in the Batcave. And I love that, they explain where that went. Birds of a Feather is the Penguin reform episode where after when he gets released, he plans to go straight and leave crime behind. And only for Veronica Veland to essentially, try to boost her rep in high society by dating Penguin. Penguin really begins a genuine relationship, and it ends in a tragic way. I might explain a little bit more of it, because it is one of my favorite episodes, when I do my top 10 Batman animated series episodes, but I just love it, because, Penguin, for me, didn't really get that much really great episodes on the show. This was arguably my favorite. What is Reality is basically the Riddler's return episode. He's back to essentially to prove him smarter to, Batman, and essentially does a more elaborate crime which we've come to expect from our beloved, Riddler. Another great episode is Mudslide, and basically, Clayface is falling apart, after, the last encounter, and he's trying to use experimental treatment in order to save him. The Man Who Killed Batman is another great episode where a small-time criminal by the name of Sidney Debris, who has elected to nickname himself the Squid, is a small-time criminal and pretty much a loser joke villain, joke gangster, only to accidentally kill Batman. And as a result, he gets himself in Gotham's gets praised by all over Gotham's underworld, and is considered, king of Gotham because he did the unthinkable. I would say another great episode would be Harley and Ivy in the series. And basically, it's, where where we always have the classic Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy team up. It came from that, it came from this episode, where the two basically team up and do crimes together. Another great episode of the series is, of course, Shadow of the Bat, which basically introduces Batgirl. It's another two-parter, and it's essentially great, especially with Two-Face as the villain. And I do like how they have Gordon be set up for crime he didn't do, and have to prove his innocence. The Demon's Quest brings in Ra's al Ghul. He was basically hinted way back in an earlier episode, and basically, it's basically Batman versus Batman and Robin take on Ra's al Ghul, but Batman, of course, develops a relationship with Talia al Ghul, something that will be forever on in the series. Read My Lips is another great episode for me, as basically it is the introduction of the ventriloquist and Scarface. And it's basically introduces one of Batman's most unique villains in the Gotham underworld. Yeah, so basically the first season, so many great episodes off the bat. The animated series, again, the creators behind this knew exactly what they were doing. And the show was a huge success. But how it should be noted that the episodes are produced very much out of order. So sometimes, when you look up on like which episode was it, for me this is the production the order I got, and so I'm following that. This is the episodes I think were for season 1 at least. The second season of the show, with the huge success, but the executives wanted to push to have Robin appear more, because Robin would rarely appear, but like up in there. As a result, the second season, I believe, it had a new airing title of Adventures of Batman and Robin with the new title, so the series did kind of get revamped only a little bit during the original run, but it wasn't really that entirely, noteworthy, I would say. Great episodes came from this season. A Bullet for Bullock, where basically it's Gotham's toughest cop, Bullock, is essentially survives some near misses, and he is forced to ask Batman for help. Batman begrudgingly helps. I do like how there is a respect for one another, but there is a greater distrust. Batman views Bullock as a corrupt cop. Bullock views Batman as a person who shouldn't get involved in police business. But during the investigation, the two have to quell down and I think work together. This episode won a Daytime Emmy Award for Best Music Direction and Composition. And I love it because, honestly, it has a really great soundtrack, and I think it worked really well. Another great episode that came from the season was Trial. Basically, the new DA, Dennett Van Dorn, is basically out to capture Batman, and as he blames Batman for the creation of the villains. The episode delves into a subject of, did Batman create these villains? Did his presence create them? So what happened? Well, ironically, she gave the villains an idea, so they end up kidnapping her and Batman. The villains host a mock trial, blaming Batman for their creation. Two-Face is the prosecutor, Joker is the judge, the ventriloquist is the bailiff, and Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn, the Scarecrow, the Mad Hatter, Killer Croc, and the Riddler make up the jury. I love that episode for that fact, as, they essentially, go and establish, because there is an interesting topic. Did Batman create the villains? And it can go either way. Another episode came out was Harlequinade, where basically the Joker steals an atomic bomb, and Batman and Robin have to team up with Harley Quinn in order to find where the Joker is. It's a Joker-centric story. Time Out of Joint is basically the return of the Clock King, still against his vendetta with Mayor Hill, but this time the Clock King has a device to help him, which kind of slows down time, essentially. Another great episode was Catwalk, where, with Catwoman trying to, push away the urges of her old ways, she, ends up teaming up with the ventriloquist for a caper. Essentially that. It's, can she, resist her criminal urges? Another one came in the season was, of course, the episode that gave us Bane, which is a great episode, but I really wish it could have been a two-parter. And, of course, the introduction to Baby Doll. Baby Doll is a villain that was created specifically for the show, and she's very sympathetic. She was originally an actress in a beloved sitcom, but she had this unique disease that prevented her from growing. She tried to pursue another, a very unique career, but it just never went anywhere. She got typecasted. Eventually, she grew deranged and slowly began to believe she was this character. It's essentially her just wants to have, like a normal life, but the way she looks, she can't have that. So I can't help but always feel sorry with her because of that. Other great episodes came, another episode came here was The Lion and the Unicorn, where Red Claw essentially kidnaps Alfred and explores Alfred's time in, I think, MI6. Another episode, Showdown, which actually gives us Jonah Hex, if you believe it or not. And basically, it's about, after an encounter with some ninjas, Batman believes it's Ra's al Ghul, only to find a tape and listens to a story from his past where he had an encounter with Jonah Hex, who planned to to stop one of Ra's al Ghul's many plots over the years. The episode pretty much ends with revealing the person they kidnapped from Old Folks' Home was one of Ra's al Ghul's sons, who wants to spend final moments he can with him. So I kind of like that. Riddler's Reform episode was the last time the Riddler was on the show. But I love how it establishes, despite all the success that the Riddler has, because he's reformed, he's part of this toy company now, he's rich, he's got girls, but he just can't let this vendetta go with him, Batman. He has to prove that Riddler has to prove that he is the better man. And I love how it ends with, Batman escaping a death trap, but he doesn't tell Riddler how he got out. And Riddler is obsessed, how, did this happen? There's no way he could have gotten out. That is classic Riddler for you. Second Chance is another great episode, probably because it has Two-Face in it. And basically, it revolves around, Two-Face is about to go under a surgery that will restore Harvey Dent. He is kidnapped, and Batman has to find out who did it. Spoiler, it is actually Two-Face that kidnapped Harvey, and this was done simply, to, prevent the operation, showing that, just how strong the Two-Face persona is. And I love that because it delves into that matter. Harley's Holiday is essentially a Harley Quinn reform episode. The series always did that, reform episodes. Lockup is another great one, but basically we introduced to Lyle Bolton, head of security at Arkham, who uses extreme methods to have the inmates locked up. After getting fired, after being shown of his corruptness, he reappears 6 months later as a vigilante known as Lockup, where the character locks up who he feels, should be behind bars. He's an eccentric character, and I love how so unique he is. Deep Freeze is essentially another episode in the Batman series, and which essentially in the series, and essentially revolves around Mr. Freeze is kidnapped, taken out from prison, and essentially is forced to team up with this guy against his will to help in his mad scheme, if that makes any sense. And basically it reveals that his wife is actually not alive, but find his wife still not dead, but still alive, but still frozen, and basically that's the deal he comes to help with. It ends with the episode Batgirl Returns, which basically Bruce is away in Europe, and Catwoman is set up for crimes she didn't do, so Batgirl has to team up with Robin to help out. Now, it should be noted, the original animated series did have 3 seasons. Now, a lot of the episodes I realized are actually kind of meant to be part of 2 series. There's 2 separate episodes. What's the word I'm looking for? Season 2 and Season 3 episodes, I just read came from both, so I kind of blended the 2 together, so if that makes any sense. Because because of out of production order, it can be confusing sometimes. There was an original 3 seasons. I guess you could divide some of the episodes we did in Season 1 to be their own thing. And as a result, it depends on where you ask. The 3rd season is actually the New Adventures episodes, and as a result, the first 3 seasons of the original series are actually just 2 seasons. It depends on who you ask and which website you're searching from. So for this, I'm gonna have both seasons 2 and 3 on the same thing, which I just explained. I realize I'm kind of too late to fix things up. But basically, that's what it is. So I kind of consider these to be 2 of the same seasons. Again, there's a lot of confusion, but that is essentially. But basically, the episodes I just pointed out, I kind of consider to be, essentially part of 2 separate seasons. And who knows, from the 1st season, maybe some of those episodes are part of those. These are some of my favorite episodes. But anyway, let's get to the official 4th season. The 4th season is a very different product. The 4th season of the show is essentially Batman: The New Adventures, and essentially all the characters were completely redesigned here. No doubt to fit in with the spin-off series, the Superman animated series, and as a result, you could definitely tell the series went through a complete, I would say, a different take on some of these characters. Some worked, some didn't. I'm not really going to get too much into that, as I personally feel they gave us some really great episodes this season. The first episode of the season is called Holiday Night. It kind of takes place really before some really important episodes, like Sins of the Father and Growing Pains, but essentially it's kind of like an anthology type of thing, where 3 separate stories take place on a holiday. The first one more so takes place, I would say either Christmas or Christmas Eve. Definitely the first 2 are tied together with being around the Christmas season. But essentially, the first one is a story in the episode is basically Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn kidnap Bruce Wayne and essentially put Bruce under Ivy's spell to use his credit cards for a shopping spree. The second one is, while Barbara Gordon is searching for a gift for her father, they end up stumbling across a group of shoplifters who essentially turn out to be Clayface, once all together. The third one is Batman and Robin essentially trying to take down the Joker before he tries to kill everyone on New Year's Eve, or on New Year's Christmas special type thing, or celebration type thing. But it ends with one of my favorite bits of the episode. My favorite bit of the episode is, it turns out every year Batman and Gordon meet up at a cafe to share a coffee on a New Year's Eve to celebrate the new year, to another year, essentially. I love moments like that, because it goes to show just how much of, love there is between Gordon and Batman, and how much of respect and trust they have for one another. Sins of the Father, the second episode, pretty much brings in Tim Drake. Basically, he's an orphan, but after an encounter with one of Batman's enemies, Two-Face, he ends up getting taken to the Batcave. This is his origin, how he becomes Robin. But it also time jumps to what happened to Dick Grayson, essentially, especially at the end. I love this episode. It's a nice, fun adventure. Not top 10, I assure you, but it's definitely fun nonetheless. Another episode I want to talk about in the season is Cold Comfort. Basically, the return of Mr. Freeze after the events of the original series and the spin-off movie Sub-Zero, which I'll get into later. And essentially, Mr. Freeze wants revenge after filled with hate. He goes around destroying things everyone loves so people can, feel the pain he's going through, which is interesting in its own right in the story they go with. Now, Mr. Freeze's story does continue on into Batman Beyond. Who knows? I might review that later on, the Batman Beyond series. But I do love that bit. I just don't like how they essentially had his head cut off and as part of this robotic legs. I never really liked that. Another favorite episode that I think really wish people talked about is Double Talk. Essentially is Arnold Wesker reform episode. And unlike many villains, he actually does reform. This is essentially, he's released from Arkham, he's working at Wayne Enterprises, and he's trying to completely get away from the Scarface persona. But, things are not going his way. Scarface persona resurfaces, mostly because of the Scarface's old gang, and Wesker kind of is forced to go back into his old criminal ways. But by the end, he's back to normal. He gets rid of the Scarface thing to live a quiet life. And I kind of like that, because Batman is actually going out of his way to actually help, help, a villain reform. Never Fear is pretty much the introduction to the new design of the Scarecrow. And I do love the design, but I also feel maybe it might have strayed a little bit too away from the original Scarecrow design, but hey, it works. I also love the idea that he's, instead of, having a toxin that gives you fear, it actually eliminates the fear, and as a result, people are incredibly reckless and endanger themselves, which is a very interesting thing. And of course, what happens if Batman gets, infected with this? So I kind of love that, and it's kind of Robin having to stand up and, try and figure this out. One of the episodes I don't really care for that much was Joker's Millions. Essentially, the episode is basically after a crime boss dies, he leaves his entire, in his will, he leaves basically his entire fortune to the Joker. The Joker basically goes on a huge shopping spree, but then he realizes that most of the money is actually fake, and it was one of Barlow's tricks. Now, he has to quickly get some cash on a real, get some hands on real cash. I kind of like that. Growing Pains is basically Robin finds this little girl with amnesia named Annie, and is stalked by her father. The father turns out to be Clayface, however, and the little girl was created you know, by him in order to, you know, salvate the city. But she eventually, you know, her own body, you gave her own body, but also she developed her own personality. It's a very tragic ending, and I think it furthers Robin's story here and gives him some real character development. Over the Edge is a beloved episode of the 4th season. What I love about it, it's essentially the whole premise is during a fight with the Scarecrow, Batgirl is killed, and Gordon finds out. Gordon blames Batman for this and vows revenge. As a result, Batman, Robin are on the run, Alfred is arrested, Nightwing is arrested. I kind of love, like, it's an interesting episode, and it's basically what the F. True, the ending kind of basically does the, oh, it was all a dream. But I do love how it was Batgirl's dream, with her fear of, you know, not telling her father anything. I do love they go in that direction. Mean Seasons, interesting episode. Basically the premise is Batman and Batgirl pursue an ex-model who essentially is getting revenge on those who caused her disfigurement. She calls herself Calendar Girl. I actually love this. I love this episode. I feel it's very underrated, and I just love the ending because it's tragic. See, the ending is when she's arrested, they forcibly take this mask off her, and she goes into a breakdown. See, her face is beautiful, but to her, because she's so, you know, so messed up, courtesy of what the industry put her through to look young and current and relevant, she thinks that her face is disfigured. And this beauty that everyone sees, to her, she sees nothing but scars. The name, of course, Calendar Girl, is clearly taken from Calendar Man, but at the same time, this is a very different take. I absolutely love what they've done here. It was, in my opinion, a really good way to go. Old Wounds is another great addition to the series, as it essentially tells the story in flashbacks what happened between Batman and the original Robin, and Robin becoming Nightwing. It explores one thing that always happens with Bruce and Dick. Dick essentially grows distance with Batman, and essentially it affects their relationship because, you know, Dick doesn't want to do the violence, you know, thinks that, you know, that Batman is too controlling of his life. This episode also reveals how Batman discovered who Batgirl is, because beginning of the series, Batgirl knows Bruce Wayne is Batman, and Bruce knows that Barbara is Batgirl. So I kind of like they go in that direction. Overall, I love that. Legends of the Dark Knight is a very interesting episode, as basically a group of youth tell stories of who they think Batman is. The episode acknowledges the works of many people who have, you know, influenced Batman over the years. Bill Finger, Dick Sprang. And I do like, and the animation style changes with each you telling their story, essentially throwbacks to, you know, other Batman, you know, artist designs who have done the Caped Crusader over the years. So I really love they went with that. Girls' Night Out, not a really episode I'm not that hugely fond of, but mostly because, I guess because it essentially is a crossover episode with the Supergirl series at the time. Essentially, Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn team up with a villain from Superman's Rogues Gallery, Livewire, who was just recently introduced into the show, and is a character not from the comics. As a result, however, Batman and Superman are away and out of town. This results in Batgirl and Supergirl having to team up. I kind of do love that. The series should be, for me, best remembered for the episode Mad Love, which is an absolute favorite of mine, and it tells Harley Quinn's origin to how she met the Joker. This is again, the animated series crowning achievement will always be for essentially the creation of Harley Quinn. This was an adaptation of a comic that they just did kinda at the time, so this kinda confirms it. And this is the origin story that Harley Quinn has always had in the comics since then, and has rarely ever strayed away from it. Beware the Creeper ironically introduces a new superhero character into the series of the Creeper. Basically, a character of Jack Ryder was introduced in this season as a reporter. But however, and when he was doing a story on who created the Joker, he ends up falling into a vat of chemicals, the same one that Joker fell into way back in the day. But mixed with the Joker's laughing gas, he comes out very deranged. Instead of having pale white skin, he has essentially yellow skin. and becomes the Creeper, a crazed maniac. And he essentially goes to get his revenge on the Joker, but he also develops a much unwanted crush on Harley Quinn, which I kind of love that they went in that direction. This is a very different episode. Again, of course there's other episodes but that I'm skipping over. Sorry. But those are just episodes that for me are highlights for me, and I feel that they are really great highlight episodes. The final episode of the whole, the original, all the series in general, is of course called, of the whole series in general, called Judgment Day. Basically, it revolves around a new vigilante in town. He uses lethal force to take down the criminals, and Batman must figure out his true identity. Now, it's an interesting episode. I wouldn't say it's the best way to end a series on, but I do love it's more of a murder mystery. Some of the villains are, that we see get apprehended, like Killer Croc, the Penguin, the Riddler, and Two-Face plays a prominent role in the story. I won't spoil the ending because it's a really good one, but I will say this: it involves one of Batman's greatest villains and really shows the mental state he's in. But I will say this: no, it is not Joker, even though that does ironically describe Joker to a T. The series gave us some actual spin-off movies in the series. One is, of course, called Batman Mask of the Phantasm. This was made during the original series run, and was essentially made with a huge budget, was meant to have a theatrical release. It did, but didn't do so well. It later gained huge cult following, and is considered, ironically, one of the best interpretations of Batman, and considered by many to be one of the greatest Batman films of all time. The premise in that film is Batman is being framed for crimes he didn't do, with certain gangsters essentially are being killed by a new masked vigilante known as the Phantasm. This also explores this series incarnation of Batman's origin and how he had his first love. But because we all know that love ended in tragedy. I'm not going to spoil the ending, but it's really great and has some of the greatest moments, such as the infamous Joker final laugh, and I absolutely love it for it. The Batman Superman movie is essentially it's kind of the animated series, the New Adventures of Batman and the Superman animated series kind of crossover film, and that's essentially it, with the Joker and Lex Luthor teaming up. It's a classic. That Sub-Zero for me is surprisingly a very underrated film in my honest opinion. Basically after the events of Mr. Freeze in the original series, after his wife's container, who he's just found, after he got his wife back, container breaks, she's now dying, and he is rushing and essentially has to, go to extreme lengths to save her before she dies. What I absolutely love about it is, now this was made to capitalize on the success of Batman and Robin, because that film didn't do so well, the film got pushed back. Ironically, this film, made for cartoon, is far better than the live-action film that felt more like a cartoon. I also like to consider this is where the Mr. Freeze story should have ended, but at the same time, I did like with what they did in the New Adventures, so I am mixed when I see this. But it also kind of, in my opinion, ends a Mr. Freeze trilogy, if that makes sense. Anyway, so I always loved the spin-off animated movie. Then, of course, I said my least favorite is Batman Mystery of the Batwoman. Essentially, it's pretty much Batwoman's appearance on the scene. It does go for a bit of a mystery element with, who is Batwoman. And the series also brings back Rupert Thorne in a way, with essentially the Penguin, Rupert Thorne, and a new gangster kind of team up to essentially do this gun deal. But whilst they're trying to do it, this new vigilante pops up and causes problems for everyone involved. So I'm again, not my favorite, and it's not the worst thing in the world, but it is I would say a different movie, if I could be all honest. Overall, with 4 seasons and 4 spin-off movies, how do I rate this series? Well, ladies and gentlemen, there's only really one standard. I give Batman, the animated series, 5 out of 5 stars. This is the best animated program ever. Even some of the weaker episodes are still fun and enjoyable. It has a lot of standout episodes. If you haven't seen this, both the original Batman the Animated Series and I consider its 4th season, Batman The New Adventures, give it a watch. You will enjoy it. It is an absolute treat to watch. It is arguably one of the greatest superhero cartoons of all time, and it still stands up even after, way back when it first aired in 1992. And there we have it. That was another episode from Animation Corner. Batman the Animated Series is still considered one of the greatest animated shows, and I can't wait to hopefully review Batman the Caped Crusader. I heard that they kind of cancelled the series, as it's the reason why I'm interested in that series because it's still done by the same creators who did Batman the Animated Series. So I can't wait to see Batman Caped Crusader. Hopefully it's still going forward because I really want to see it. Anyway, that was Batman the Animated Series. So please, ladies and gentlemen, join us next time in another animated series program, and that will be Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. So please stick around. So please be prepared for the next episode of that when we do it, if I get around to it. And this has been another episode from the Animation Corner. This has been the Steven Hour. Ladies and gentlemen, have a good day. So long for now. I know it's been a long time since we've done an animation corner episode, but you know, I do love the series, but it's something that will pop up every now and again. Same with my TV show series reviews or movie reviews. It's something that will pop up. I do plan to, from now on, have at least once a month have a movie review, TV show, and animation corner pop up at least once every month, to try and focus on that in the top 10. I'm going to try and, you know, redo some things to sort of help things out a bit. You know, have like these type of things pop up. I'm going to do one animation corner episode, one TV show, one movie review, top 10, and of course the other usual sideline projects, whether I'm reviewing a superhero show episode by episode, and my anthology series are the Dragon's Wars and the Noir Files, and any other movie review series I might do, because I still haven't decided what I'm going to replace the Bond series or the Harry Potter, but I have an idea. Just give me a moment to really think about that, because I want to refocus on these projects before the year is up. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Steven Hour. I hope you enjoyed this very long episode. Have a good day, and so long for now.